Hello, Taco Joshi Anime Curious. My name is RandomSama613, and welcome to Anime Opinions. This is the second video of my final thoughts from the spring 2014 anime season. It will likely be the last, but there may be a third one. It's entirely possible. This time I'm going to be talking about a series that hasn't been getting a lot of talk, and I'm somewhat surprised because it's an extremely good series, but it's not terribly surprising considering the author's previous work, which also doesn't have a lot of knowledge surrounding it. I am, of course, talking about Chaika the Coffin Princess, which is a 12-episode anime done by Studio Bones, and was written by Toko Machida, a writer probably best known for his other series that I absolutely love, which is Scrapped Princess. Chaika the Coffin Princess, as I mentioned at the beginning of the season, follows a character named Chaika Gaz, the daughter of a recently defeated emperor known as Emperor Gaz, of course. And she is attempting to gather her father's body parts to give him a funeral. And she's being aided by a couple of saboteurs, who are a brother and sister, and there's some additional characters who come in as well. One of the first things I want to mention about this series is the animation style. Now, it can be somewhat off-putting because I think that for me, it looked like the characters were somewhat two-dimensional in most resting sequences. They didn't look like they were fully fleshed out three-dimensional characters, and I think that's the art style, which is a stylistic choice that I'm fine with and I enjoyed it. The action sequences still looked really alive and still looked very good, but again, all the characters seem to look kind of flat, which isn't a bad thing. It's just something that I figured I should mention. And I think I'd describe that as kind of a manga-esque style, which kind of is a carryover from the last series that this entire team worked on, which was Scrapped Princess. They look very similar in certain aspects, and I'd say that this is one of them to a certain extent. I will also say that the characters are distinct from each other yet again. There's a little bit of sameness in some of the background characters, but that's almost to be expected. Other than that, I do believe that the characters look unique from each other. They all have interesting character designs. I think one of the big things as well is that the weapon design is fantastic for this series. All the weapons look super interesting and really, really well designed. And they're just cool to watch be used, to be perfectly honest. And I really like all of the concepts behind all the weapons. Another thing that, of course, needs to be mentioned is that the background art looks really, really good. I will say there is some sameness and it feels like reused assets, but it probably has something to do with the region that they're in being primarily forest with a little bit of desert, and that's about it. Mountainous area as well. And some of the assets feel somewhat reused, which is kind of a bummer because otherwise the backgrounds are still very gorgeous. They look great. The towns look interesting. They're somewhat unique in the way that they're designed. All of the other backgrounds look great as well. So it's kind of sad to say that some of the assets look like they are reused, but it still looks very, very good. And the next thing I'm going to mention, of course, is the soundtrack. The OP is really, really good. The ED is also excellent. I didn't listen to them every time, but they were still very, very good. So, that's all I really have to say about those. The ambient sounds as well as the background music and mood music also fit really well, and they sounded really good. That's, all the sound design is fantastic for this series, which is to be expected because this previous series that this team did was also really well done. Another thing to be mentioned is the characters. These kind of drive this series, and they really help to make the plot stand out a lot more. All of the characters are interesting. They all have background to them, which I like. They do kind of explain some of this background, but not an overly large amount, which leaves some mystery, and I enjoy that because it makes you want to keep watching. Because I think one of the biggest things about the series, about these characters, is that they seem somewhat flat and one-dimensional in terms of their personalities, but they have a lot of hidden depth to them, which I really enjoy about this writer's style, is that they start out kind of one-dimensional and he slowly builds upon them. And I really, really enjoy that aspect of the series, is the building on the characters and making them fleshed out and seem much more interesting than they initially do. I would say that the antagonists are also very interesting, in addition to the protagonists, because I wouldn't necessarily say that the primary characters that are being followed can be divided into the quote-unquote good guys and the quote-unquote bad guys, because it's very hard to say who is good and who is bad of that group. There are some obvious standouts that are quote-unquote evil, but it's very hard to differentiate who's the good guy and who's the bad guy sometimes, just based upon actions, which makes for a very interesting series to watch, and it makes the characters seem all the more interesting. So, and like I said, the characters really make this series. They really do. And they're just fantastic. They're really well built, and I greatly enjoyed that. And we can't talk about Chaika without talking about the plot. It starts out with Chaika just wanting to gather the remains of her father and give him a proper burial. And it quickly grows from that. It becomes much, much more. There's a lot of twists. There's a lot of turns. There's a great deal of depth. There's a ton of intrigue. There's politics involved. There's the pasts of the saboteurs that are hired by Chaika. There's a certain romance element to it as well, but that's very understated and doesn't really drive the series per se, which I greatly appreciate. And there's just a ton to the plot, which is fantastic. And I think the biggest thing about the plot twists is they don't feel like they're being forced. They don't feel like they're being introduced to create a plot twist. They feel very organic to the plot, kind of like it's been planned out that this is how it's going to go. But at the same time, they're still unexpected, which is very important for plot twists. They can't be expected or they don't work. And they don't feel like anything you'd expect. But at the same time, like I said, they don't feel contrived, which I greatly appreciate. There is an overarching plot for this particular series, which is, like I said, it's Chaika trying to gather her father's remains. But there's a bunch of other intrigue and side plots and subplots that are woven into it to make it much, much more than just that overarching plot. And I really appreciate that. Because there's episode plots, which are great, and then there's smaller arc plots, which are also great, and then there's the overarching plot. So you have a ton of different things going on, but you never lose track of what's going on, which is another important thing, is that it's very followable, and you don't have that problem of having to take notes to understand what's going on, which can happen when you have a complicated plot. Overall, I highly, highly recommend watching Chaika. This is only the first season. There is a second season coming out this fall. And to say that I'm hyped for this next season would be an understatement. I am extremely excited to watch another season of Chaika. I am extremely impressed with what the writer has done, with what the entire team has done. I'm very, very impressed with Chaika. It's a proper follow-up to the gorgeousness that was Scrat Princess, which is, as many of you probably know, is probably my favorite anime of all time. So, I'm very impressed with it. I highly, highly recommend it. It's not getting the attention it deserves. And that second season is going to be fantastic. But, what do you guys think about Chaika the Coffin Princess? Have you seen it? If you have, go ahead and leave a comment down below letting me know what you think. I am curious because I don't know what I know that the prevailing thought on Chaika is that it's a good series, but I don't know how many of you have seen it. If you liked the video, go ahead and throw me a like. It lets me know I'm doing something correctly. If you didn't like the video, go ahead and throw a dislike at me. Please leave me a comment. It lets me know how I'm doing. But until next time, I've been RandomSama613. This has been Anime Opinions. And until then, watch more anime.